Welcome to the What to Play podcast. I'm your host, Jacob. Lucas could not be here this week because of prior commitments, so I'm going solo once again. Let's recap what happened in the AFC divisional round between the Patriots and the Houston Texans. The Patriots winning the game 28-16. In a game that, look, we said this last week. The best way to describe it was I had the Texans winning because of that defense. That offense, I thought, maybe they could slug it along a little bit. But I didn't think the Patriots offense stood a chance. The weather, and the fact that how poorly the Texans offense played was the difference. That's what happened. Look, it wasn't the Patriots were 100% better. They were actually fumbling the ball just as much as the Texans were. But the Texans kept turning the ball over. At times you're like, what are they doing? You're like, what are they doing? Like, Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. had a game of games, and yet it didn't matter. It wasn't enough. It was so pathetic. It was so pathetic. It was sad. It was sad. It was so depressing to watch this Texans team fall apart the way they did. And this is a trend. This is a trend that they've had for the last couple years under DeMeco Ryan, where they win a game in the playoffs, and then the following game, they just fall apart. 12 points this game, 9 points last year against the Chiefs. I think it was 24 points the year before. It was absurd. They don't have an offense. And you have, excuse me, you have to ask yourself, do we have the right offensive coordinator? Because you've already made a change once. You did it last year. Do you have the right offensive coordinator? Do you have the right quarterback to run the system you're asking him to run? Do you have the right weapons that you're asking him to do? What you're asking him to do? I don't see that. I don't. I don't know if you have the right quarterback. I don't know if you have the right weapons. Your offensive line has continuously been a disaster for the last several years, and yet you don't do anything about it. You don't bring guys in. You brought in Trent Brown, great, but you still have issues because Trent Brown hasn't played in a lot of games the last couple of years. The whole side of the whole left guard to right tackle situation is a complete dumpster fire. You don't know what your center is half the time. You don't have a run game. You're asking your team to win on defense and maybe have a capable offense at times. But you can't keep turning the ball over. CJ Stroud, and I want to say this, there was a month time where he didn't throw a turnover. He didn't have a turnover. And then he goes against the Chargers and he throws an interception. Even Kurt Warner was like, what is he doing? Why is he throwing it there? There was no reason to throw it there. That was his first turnover in a month. He had about 7 turnovers in the playoffs before it just completely fell apart in that second half. It was just complete disarray. They didn't know what they were doing. We were still in the first quarter. He had 2 interceptions. He had mistakes. He had just plays that, okay, it wasn't like the ball got batted in the air and got intercepted. That's just bad luck. He's throwing it into a place where there's nowhere to go. And I get it. No Nico Collins. But can your team survive on anything else than Nico Collins? Please. It's just disheartening. Every game they do this. It was that way last year. And I know, yeah, you lost Tank Dell. I got that. Stephon Diggs left in free agency, but he was injured. I get that. But you were so bad this year. And that's the issue. Go make some adjustments. Add to the wide receiver position. Add to the run game. Add to the offensive line. Just add, and add at some point, please. And for the Patriots, you played a good game when you had to have it moments, when you had to have it. You go down the field, you score a touchdown. It's a great throw by Drake May to Kayshon Boutte for a touchdown. Stephon Diggs had a great game. Kayshon Boutte, nice one-handed catch in the end zone for a touchdown. Great ball by Drake May. My game goes to Stephon Diggs. That's who it goes to. That's my star of the game. Because when we talk about how unselfish this team is, we talk about it all the time. I want to see them play better. Too many turnovers. Too many turnovers the last 2 weeks. That has to be addressed. I told you that the defensive line of the Houston Texans would get after him. I didn't think the weather would be such an impact, but it was. You can't keep turning the ball over. And now you go against a Denver team that is really good in getting turnovers. And they blitz. And they blitz a lot. It's going to be hard to see what happens. But let's move into that game. The Broncos are 5.5-point underdogs. This comes after the Bo Nix injury, where he fractured his ankle and having surgery on Tuesday. He's done for the year. Jarrett Stidham, the former New England Patriot, is going to start in the AFC Championship game. Excuse me. Hasn't thrown a pass since 2023. He is the first quarterback ever since the stat has been recorded to start an AFC Championship game or a championship game, period, without throwing a pass the whole year. It's going to be a weird game because I don't know what the Broncos offense is going to do. I don't know how this is going to work. They're going to have to lean on the run game, and hopefully that benefits them. Even though the run game has not been that good, the Patriots have been good against stopping the run. I'm curious to see what happens here. Really, I think this is going to be a battle of the defenses because I think it's going to be difficult for the Patriots to do much of anything, even though the Bills were able to move the football against the Broncos. I don't know if the Patriots can be that disciplined and just running the football constantly. But maybe they can. Who knows? I'm going to give the edge to the Patriots on this one because of the offense. I think we've seen it so many times. The Patriots have a drive where they look really good, and that's enough. I wonder if that's going to happen again. I bet that it's going to happen again. So with all that being said, I'm going to take the Patriots to win in a game that it will be closer than expected. But they are going to win and make it back to the Super Bowl in a 24-17 match. 24-17. Let's move on to the John Harbaugh news. Now, I said this. John Harbaugh, he took the job with the Giants. But he went, and this was announced yesterday, that he would be directly reporting to the Mara and Tisch family, not General Manager Joe Schoen. And I know this is a big deal for a lot of people, and it is a big deal. This is not the normal structure of how you would build. But if you remember the way it was done in Baltimore, John Harbaugh would report directly to the owner, not the general manager. But it also fell apart in Baltimore. So for the Giants, I'm curious to see why they did it, but I also understand it. And the reason I understand it is Joe Schoen has not been good as the general manager. A lot of people don't think, including myself, don't think he should still have the job because he was not good. They haven't drafted well. They made some poor decisions in free agency, adding free agents, letting go of free agents, very poor decisions. And you're trying to figure out how to make this work. And also, you knew they had to give a lot to John Harbaugh in order to get him. I guarantee you this was one of the reasons. It's just not the normal structuring of how things go. But I think also Harbaugh is doing it and saying, if we don't have success, Joe Shane might be gone next year. And then I have to have the same structure? No. I just want to report directly to the ownership. And that makes sense at the end of the day. It really does. It's just, like I said, not the normal structure of things. Let's move into the Cowboys defensive coordinator search. This is our final item on our agenda. Well, first of all, Brian Flores not going to be the defensive coordinator. That's not going to happen. He has signed a deal with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, he's still up for contention for head coaching opportunities. So if he gets one of those, chances are he'll take it. But if he doesn't, he'll revert back to the Minnesota Vikings. That was explained by Tom Pelissero. So he's not going to be there. The Cowboys have done in-person interviews for 3 of their 4 candidates. The secondary coach of the Vikings, Jones, Parker, the secondary coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, Jonathan Gannon of the former head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. They've all interviewed for this position. There's only been one that hasn't. And it's because he can't or chose not to. We'll get into that. Jim Leonhard, the passing game coordinator for the Denver Broncos. He's been a defensive coordinator in college, had multiple opportunities of becoming a defensive coordinator in the pros, has chosen in the past to stay with Vance Joseph and on that defensive staff. But now that Vance Joseph could be going, depending on if he gets a head coaching job, there's 3 ways that this could happen. Either Leonhard, will revert back to his role if Vance Joseph doesn't leave. If Vance Joseph does leave, the Broncos could just promote Leonhard, or Leonhard could go somewhere else, no matter what Vance Joseph does. Now, I didn't know this. Only found this out yesterday. That according to how the rules work, I did know that if you go into the Super Bowl week, you have that bye week, you can interview for jobs. I did know that. I didn't know that you had to have a virtual interview first before you could do that. And you had to have a virtual interview during that bye week. I didn't know that. So basically stating every team that wants to interview Jim Leonhard who didn't do a virtual interview with him during that bye week, if the Broncos go to the Super Bowl, cannot interview him until after the Super Bowl. The only 2 teams that could are the Giants and the Cowboys. And that is because during the bye week, they did a virtual interview with him. So getting ahead of the curve there by letting their guys go early allowed them to interview him during the bye week. So if the Broncos do make the Super Bowl, they can be the only 2 teams to interview him until after the Super Bowl, which gives you an advantage. It also gives you an advantage of if the Broncos lose this weekend, and Jim Leonhard could interview whatever he wants, but still the Cowboys and the Giants would be ahead of all those other teams because they've already done an interview. They know what he said, and now they can do another one. Sorry, I have a sore throat today. But I didn't know, this is another thing I didn't know, that according to how the rules work, and it's conflicting a little bit, so it's not 100% accurate, but according to how the rules work, the Cowboys and or the Giants would have interviewed Jim Leonard this week, which I didn't know that. Now, the chances are he chose not to because he wants to prepare for this AFC Championship game, or those teams chose not to and chose to push it off. Either way, they could have interviewed and didn't this week. They could have done it on Tuesday, but maybe they didn't want to. Or he chose not to, like I said before. I think it's more likely that if he was able to, they would have elected as two sides would have collectively said, no, let's wait. Because if you make the Super Bowl, we'll have that whole week. And if you don't, we can do it then. So I'm curious to see what happens. But those are the four candidates. Let me know in the comments who you have winning this week between the Patriots and Broncos. And also, are you surprised that John Harbaugh and the Tisch family are going to allow John Harbaugh to report directly to them and not to the general manager? For NFL World and the Wordplay Podcast, I'm Jacob Peter. Out.